Freedom First Society's mission statement is this: we seek to expose the conspiracy targeting our freedom and reestablish limited government under the U.S. Constitution. Thus, Freedom First Society's mission is twofold: to strengthen freedom's foundations and to expose and rout the conspiracy that has almost completely undermined those foundations. In the first video of this series, we discussed some of freedom's foundations so that we know what our country must return to. Unfortunately, the enemies of freedom have successfully turned evil to good in the minds of the American people. So we find it essential to show clearly what is wrong with the path our country is on. Americanism, as established by our founders, is the recognition that human rights come from God and that government's primary purpose is to secure those rights. Let's compare the system of government established by America's founders with other systems of government. This will help us understand why Americans at one time experienced freedom that no other country in the history of the world has enjoyed. It will also give us insight on what types of government and economic systems we do not want to live under. Most of the world has lived under some type of tyranny, including monarchies, ruled by one, and oligarchies, ruled by a few. Even anarchy, no ruler, quickly becomes a tyranny. Anarchy cannot really exist because in a state of chaos, the most ruthless person or group is going to end up dominating everyone else, which is monarchy or oligarchy. Basically, anarchy sets the stage for a dictator to take over. Beware of political ideas that favor anarchy. You may be thinking, good thing I live in a democracy. But did you realize that democracy is not a good form of government? It means rule by the people, or majority rules. It could also be called mobocracy. There is nothing to stop the mob, or majority, from voting away the rights of the minority. Under democracy, property rights quickly disintegrate. While it appears that the majority rules in a democracy, those who control the media, education, or public opinion in some way control the country, more like an oligarchy. James Madison said, "Pure democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths." So that brings up the question, is the United States of America a democracy? No, that is not what our founders gave us. Think about our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. The enemies of freedom have perpetuated the widespread idea that we live in a democracy and that democracy is a good thing. Neither is true. We were given a classical constitutional republic in which the government, not the people, is limited by law. When government is limited by law, the people have freedom. In a republic, citizens keep the fruits of their labors, so they are highly motivated to produce, which makes a country wealthy. Think about it. Money listed in your bank account doesn't constitute a high standard of living. It's the goods and services available that make wealth. Money is only useful if there are things to buy. Our constitutional system is uniquely free, but Americans have been tricked into treating our republic like a democracy. As we shall show in the next video of this series, we are being ruled by an oligarchy that controls public opinion through media and education. We must wake others and together demand our constitutional republic back. Now let's talk about economic systems, imposed or protected by political systems. All economic systems are based on capital, which is the means of production. They are all some form of capitalism. The main way they differ is in who owns and controls the capital or property. Under competitive free market or free enterprise capitalism, property is owned and controlled privately. Putting their property to use, the property owners produce goods and services, and they compete for a share of the market which spurs excellence. People are motivated to produce because they get to keep the profit from their labors. So this creates abundance and a better lifestyle for everyone. This type of economic system can exist in a republic because the government is restricted from taking away property rights. And the majority cannot vote to take away property by force. Monopolistic economic systems come in many forms, but in all of them, government controls property. If you don't control your property, you don't benefit from owning it. Under fascism, the government controls all property, but doesn't own it. Under socialism or Nazism, remember Nazi stands for National Socialist German Workers' Party, the government controls all the property and owns some of it. Socialism can be a transitional phase from competitive capitalism to communism, wherein socialism progresses to communism. At that point, all property is owned and controlled by the government. It's the control of property that gives tyrants their power. Basically, fascism, advanced socialism, and communism are different varieties of the feudalism of the Dark Ages, in which a small elite owned all the property and everyone else was beholden to them. Without control of property, there is no freedom. Property is necessary to produce the necessities of life. You will bow to the wishes of those who control property, or you may lose your life for the want of necessities. Interestingly, while the governments of monopolistic economic systems like fascism, socialism, and communism promise the necessities, they don't deliver. The people have reduced incentive to produce, but more significantly, the governments use rationing to control the people. Does the US government own and control property? The resounding answer to that question is yes. Large areas of the United States are owned and controlled by the government. And this doesn't even take into account all the onerous rules and regulations imposed on property owned by businesses, both small and large. Any government interference with private property ownership is not sanctioned by the US Constitution and must be rolled back for us to continue to enjoy an abundant lifestyle and freedom. So here's the political spectrum from least governance to most. Did you think that constitutionalists were right-wing extremists? In reality, they're right in the middle. But there is a little flaw in this model. It should be bent like this, because it is just a short jump from anarchy to totalitarianism. As stated before, despots take advantage of anarchy to seize power. When you look at some of the oligarchies existing in the world today, like Russia and China, they look like they may be doing okay, because those governments have been propped up by various forms of US foreign aid. On the other hand, a constitutional republic is very stable on one condition: the people serve God. When people govern themselves under God's laws, there's no ostensible need for heavy-handed government, and would-be tyrants have very little pretext to usurp power. John Adams said, "Our Constitution was made only for moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." That is one reason why Marxists attack religion and promote the breaking of God's laws, to have a reason to impose their form of order. Vladimir Lenin explained that atheism is a natural and inseparable part of Marxism, of the theory and practice of scientific socialism. Our program necessarily includes the propaganda of atheism. Close quote. By definition, atheists cannot believe that their rights, including property rights, and the rights of others, come from God. Without that, nothing stops them from allowing the government to revoke their neighbors' rights and ultimately their own rights. Additionally, God teaches people to repent, forgive, and progress. In contrast, victim mentality is very useful in stirring up a Marxist revolution. The Communist Manifesto lays out a plan to develop Marxism, which includes socialism and communism, in a society. It is very aggressive. Its goal is to stir up a class of victims to vote away the rights of their neighbors. Its goal is the abolition of private property, which equates to slavery. The founders of our country rose from the oppression of the British. With God's help, they replaced that oppressive government with our constitutional republic. The Communist Manifesto lays out 10 planks that will establish communism in the most advanced countries. You may recognize that the US has nearly implemented all of them. Consider that we have a heavy graduated income tax, heavy taxation of inheritance, a central bank, control of communication and transportation, and public education. Why would people fall for measures that are explicitly communist? The promoters of Marxism are patient and deceptive. First, they made Americans think they were living in a democracy. Then, they molded public opinion to accept socialist principles and abandon the Constitution and free enterprise principles. Take, for instance, how media and education have skewed people's perception of capitalism. Many people are deceived into thinking that free enterprise is responsible for the monopolistic type of capitalism we see in the US today. What they don't understand is that Marxist socialist measures erode America's middle class, which would provide strong opposition to monopolies. A graduated income tax, one of the planks of the Communist Manifesto, takes away capital that could be used by individuals to compete in a free enterprise system. Heavy regulations lay additional expenses on small businesses until it is no longer profitable to be in business. Government subsidies are given to select businesses, and those businesses not receiving taxpayer funding cannot compete. If government were restrained from controlling industry under the Constitution as it was originally written, it would be very difficult for monopolies to exist. Gathering industry into a few large companies makes it easier for government to control industry in a Marxist or fascist fashion. Even though all these measures to control businesses are unconstitutional, most people, ignorant of constitutional principles, may also believe the Constitution, as set up by our founders, doesn't work when the economy fails. But it is the departure from constitutional principles, driven by those seeking totalitarian power, that causes the failing. Remember, one of the planks of the Communist Manifesto is establishment of a central bank, our Federal Reserve. The Constitution does not allow the government to create money. Nevertheless, this is what the Federal Reserve does. In this way, it can create inflation and artificial booms and busts in the economy. When everyone has more money, they want to spend it. But that doesn't mean there are more goods to buy. In order to get rid of marginal buyers, producers of goods and services raise their prices. Now, your dollars don't buy as much as they used to, and the value of the money that you've saved is much lower. With prices higher, government can take even more money without raising the tax rate. Essentially, the government has stolen the value of your money through inflation. John Maynard Keynes was a British socialist whose philosophies unfortunately guide US economic policies. He revealed the truth about inflation when he wrote, "Lenin is said to have declared that the best way to destroy the capitalist system was to debauch the currency. By a continuing process of inflation, governments can confiscate secretly and unobserved an important part of the wealth of their citizens." That's definitely one way to accomplish Marx's goal to abolish private property. We have empirical proof that our system of government, as established by America's founders, works to bring freedom and prosperity. It was the unique factor that brought our world into the age of industry, communication, and technology in 2 centuries of time. Prior to that, the world had only its archaic ways to show for its past 50 centuries. This testifies that the tyranny the world lived under during those centuries does not work to advance prosperity. Even the wealthiest king didn't enjoy the conveniences of air conditioning, flight, electricity, and much more. The question is, why would our country abandon something that worked so well and instead implement the planks of the Communist Manifesto? Documented in the next video of this series, the answer is that there is a conspiratorial elite who will be the kings in this feudal system set up under Marxism. They have worked together patiently for many decades to set themselves up as rulers of the world, and they are on the brink of accomplishing their goal. Freedom First Society has produced several excellent resources exposing this conspiracy because it is not too late to defeat it, and we must defeat it. An organized effort toward widespread exposure of the conspiracy and support for our Constitution is the key. Visit freedomfirstsociety.org to learn more and join with other freedom-loving patriots as we build a sufficient understanding among our friends and neighbors to help expose the plot against our freedom while there is still time.